It's a day of firsts from the coronavirus, first death in Hong Kong and first Malaysian infected. Landlords who evict their tenants during this coronavirus situation without just cause, be warned. And finally, the Straits Times Live Theatre Awards, find out who got nominated. It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, where we discuss the hottest topics of the day and explain why they matter. I'm Haryanto Diman, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Malaysia confirms its first citizen to be infected with the coronavirus, bringing the total number of confirmed cases in the country to 10. The Malaysian man had travelled to Singapore for a meeting in mid-January with colleagues from China, including one from Wuhan. Meanwhile, also a first, a man in Hong Kong has died from the coronavirus, making him the second fatality outside mainland China. The man was 39 years old and had an underlying illness. He had travelled from Hong Kong to Wuhan on January 21st before returning 2 days later. It was reported that he had not visited any healthcare facilities, wet markets or seafood markets, and had no exposure to wild animals during the incubation period. The first death outside China was reported on Sunday when a 44-year-old Chinese man died in the Philippines after arriving from Wuhan. With the whole of China in virtual lockdown, travel to, from and within the country is severely restricted. Some countries, including Singapore, also barred all travellers arriving from mainland China who had been there in the past 14 days. 427 people worldwide have died from the virus so far. In China alone, the death toll rose by a record 64 yesterday, while the total number of infections in the country has surpassed 20,000. Now to tell us more, we have China correspondent Elizabeth Law. Hi Liz.
Hi Jan.
Liz, I understand that you are still quarantined at home.
It is my last day. I'm coming back to the office tomorrow. Look at this giant smile on my face. Okay, no, sorry. We're talking about something serious.
Definitely, we are certainly looking forward to you coming back here in the office. Now, Liz, the number of deaths and infected cases are climbing day by day. China's top leadership has admitted shortcomings and difficulties in its response to the coronavirus outbreak. Now, moving forward, what is the Chinese government doing to better manage this ever-changing situation?
Well, I think it is firstly significant because, okay, I think first we need to go to the very beginning of this. This is something that's unprecedented. We've not seen this something of this scale happening in the world before. This, when you compare it to SARS, which is the last large-scale sort of outbreak in the world, at the time people weren't as connected as they are today. So that really makes a lot of difference, and the Chinese government is doing all they can. So what we've heard since last week is that they're inviting WHO experts to come into the country to help to deal with it, because having this sort of international cooperation with experts from elsewhere, it does help, because even though the Chinese experts are quite good, very, very good, in fact, at what they do, different countries do focus on different parts of research, and bringing people together from all around the world really does help. And so we've just seen that they have agreed to let US experts come in as well. There's nothing, it's nothing new. It's something that is ongoing. But so one thing that has happened is that our China Bureau Chief Tan Dong-wei, she spoke a lot about the hospitals that have been specially built to deal with this virus. Now, today, we have now seen that the hospitals are actually functioning, patients are getting transferred in. So that is another thing that they are doing. And I think as the hospitals really do get up and running in the next few days, we could see a slight improvement in the situation.
And Liz, if you could comment as well in terms of what Hong Kong is doing, because Hong Kong has reported its first death today. Any comments on that?
Well, obviously in Hong Kong, it is slightly controversial, because we do know that a lot of the medical workers are on strike now, because they have asked that Hong Kong closes all of its borders with China, and the Hong Kong government really has dragged their feet quite a bit on that. So now, the fact that there has been a first death, maybe we could see a change in in what happens, because even though many of the borders had been closed, but several of them, including the international airport, have still remained open, and so that is what medical staff are protesting about. They want the government to close the borders because they feel that when this really spills over, mainland Chinese could come into Hong Kong to seek medical treatment, and that is going to overwhelm the system. Or even if there were just a community spread, which is something that both Hong Kong and Singapore are definitely afraid of, that would basically just strain the medical system to a point when no one could cope. And then I have to bring in Macau as well, because so Macau now has ordered its casinos to close, and that is very significant. So I think that there are developments that we have to see in the coming days.
And Liz, it has been 2 weeks now, about 2 weeks since the lockdown in China. Now, how's the spirit there? You know, how are the people that you've been keeping in touch with? How are they coping with the situation?
Well, so as you can see, I wrote a story about it on Sunday's paper. It's right here. Please look at it on the Straits Times app, or go look at our story online. So basically what they are trying to do, these people are divided into two camps. One is that you're either trying to keep upbeat and as positive as possible. So like Scarlett, she's just watching a lot of videos and trying to read more books, whereas there are others, which like some of these students that I've spoken to, they seem to be a lot more downcast. They feel as though they've just been left behind and forgotten about, and they're sort of like wallowing in this very dark place, which is quite difficult to be in because there is no end in sight. And what I also do know is that, in fact, there are about just over 100 Singaporeans that are still in Hubei province as well, and they have been keeping in touch with the embassy, and amongst them there are about 20-something children. So that group is, they are connected with each other, and they're trying to support each other to keep their spirits up.
On that note, Liz, what about then the foreigners, the non-Chinese who are stuck in Wuhan, because there are no plans yet to evacuate them?
Well, so of the foreigners, there are countries who have evacuated them. Like, for instance, Singapore has done it, America has done it, France has done it, quite a lot of countries have done it, but significantly, Pakistan has not done it. And in fact, Pakistan Foreign Minister came out yesterday to say that, we are standing with China as our Chinese brethren, and so because they said that the medical system in Pakistan cannot handle an outbreak of this sort, and also they might spread the virus to Pakistan, so it's better to keep them there. Cambodia as well. Today, Hun Sen has actually said that they want to keep Cambodians in Wuhan. There's no plans to evacuate them. Significantly, so I've spoken to some Pakistani students. They have put up some videos on Facebook. They're trying to call on people to pressure the Pakistani government to try and get them out. But obviously, they do feel like they have been abandoned a little bit, and they feel like nobody cares about them. So they're in a very frustrated.
The number of cases of a new coronavirus rose.
They're just in this very frustrated place, this sort of a very dark hole now. But that being said, some others, like this other student I spoke to, Emmanuel, he is from Ghana, and he is keeping really positive. So he's doing all sorts of different things. He's going online, and he's just trying to keep his spirits up. What exactly he is doing, I think you can read more about it in that's him, Emmanuel. And so you can read more about it in our story that should be coming out soon.
Certainly looking forward to that. Now, Liz, it's interesting, right? You mentioned regarding two camps. So there are some countries who are, they've evacuated, they've had evacuation plans, and then on the other hand as well, there are countries like Pakistan and Cambodia. They have said that they're standing in solidarity, like you mentioned, with China. So it's really weighing these two things out, right? On one hand, it's show of solidarity, and the other, it's public health emergency situation. And you spoke to some analysts as well. What comments have they got in terms of balancing these two, as it were, priorities?
again, there are two sides to it. One analyst I spoke to, Prof. Xu, who is in Hong Kong University. Well, he's a historian, and he says that this is something that is of unprecedented historical. There has been nothing like that in history before. So China really is trying to find its way around. Of course, there were several missteps in the beginning, especially within the local government, where they have not handled it as well as they wanted to. But then as time went on, of course, they did get it together. The thing was that because China is just now in this really, really strong diplomatic position now. It is different from where it was during SARS. So obviously there are diplomatic concerns as well. And as you could see yesterday, when the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying actually lashed out at the US, saying that all their comments were unhelpful, and in fact they were the first to pull their citizens out of Wuhan. Prof. Xu actually pointed out that you can look at this in two ways, because basically that is really, China does need as much help as it can. It needs help from all of its friends. As the Foreign Ministry keeps saying, that a friend in need is a friend indeed. And so people they do need as much international help as possible, because for now supplies are running low, and they do want international help. But at the same time, they do need to play to their domestic audience as well, to show that, hey, we are the strong country and we can't let people be saying all these horrible things about us. So we are trying our best, and therefore there is that rhetoric that is playing to the domestic audience.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for coming into the show, to shed more light on the situation overseas. And of course, we are certainly looking forward to you returning to the office tomorrow. Now, for more on the coronavirus situation overseas, you can head to straitstimes.com. Moving on to our second segment, here in Singapore, landlords who evict tenants on home quarantine order or leave of absence or based on nationality could be barred from renting to foreign work pass holders in future. Now, in a joint statement last night, the Manpower, Education and National Development Ministries said the government had received feedback about such actions by landlords. Minister for National Development Lawrence Wong also told Parliament yesterday that evicting these tenants would only be counterproductive to current efforts in containing the virus spread.
We've also heard feedback of landlords stigmatizing tenants based on their nationality, or worse, evicting PRC tenants who are taking their leave of absence. I can appreciate that Singaporeans are very concerned about the well-being of themselves and their family members. But if landlords start turning tenants away, then our overall containment efforts will be much harder, and we end up endangering ourselves and others. The outcome will be completely counterproductive. So we should not condone such irresponsible actions that will end up putting Singapore and Singaporeans at greater risk. In such difficult times, we should not let our fears overwhelm us and cause us to overreact. Instead, let us support each other and look out for one another so that we can all get through this together.
Now, to share more on this, we have journalist T. Tuo in the studio with us. Welcome, T. T, what are the landlords afraid of, especially in cases where, these landlords, they are not living together with their tenants?
Well, as you point out, some of their concerns do stem from living in the same place as their tenants. For example, I think there was a landlord that spoke to my colleague, Yuan Xin. He told her that he was afraid of getting infected with the virus during that, 14 days of a leave of absence period. But other landlords are driven by a fear of the virus spreading within their dormitories, potentially affecting more workers. But as the government's joint release pointed out, many of these evictions are motivated sometimes by nationality. And I think we have to consider that xenophobia definitely has a large part to play in some of these reactions.
Right. So I have to ask though, what's going to happen to these workers then who have been evicted? Is the onus on them to find alternative accommodations? And if so, what regulations are in place, to help them?
Well, the short answer is many of them are stranded and have only days to find a place to stay. Some of them have told us that hotels are also turning them away, and that they have tried to contact the authorities for help, but there will be an inevitable delay. one employer spoke to me and told me that the government should start thinking about setting up quarantine centers, for example, specialized lodging. And well, there are Ministry of Manpower guidelines for employers of foreigners who hold work permits in Singapore. And part of these guidelines include that the employer needs to bear some responsibility and adhere to the guidelines for private or public housing in terms of housing their workers. So lawyers we spoke to also said that there's the legal recourse. Tenants can file claims in the small claims tribunal or sue them in the courts for breach of agreement or go for mediation. But of course, all these will take time. The government, of course, has recently said, as you pointed out, that landlords will be taken to task with restrictions if they do evict people. So yeah.
Now, having said that, Then, so what do employers do now to find alternative accommodations for evicted workers, and how long do they have for this?
Well, some are booking out hotels, some are trying to get other dormitories. I just got off the phone with an employer who had to pay 6 months of rent to house her workers for 14 days because they had been kicked out by their landlord. So I think employers are not very happy about the situation either. As for how long they have, we're right now trying to get more details with the authorities on the issue, including whether or not there's other assistance that's planned, for the workers or for the employers. I think it's important to remember that the measures for quarantine and for leave of absence are also there for our safety, for Singaporean safety. And as Law and Home Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam said recently about those who are spreading anti-Chinese sentiments, you know that these people are on leave of absence or on quarantine so that the rest of Singapore, all of us can be safe. So if they're tossed out on the streets, where are they going to go?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, T, for coming on to share more on this. Now, the ministries emphasize that those placed on home quarantine orders or leave of absence are well, and that these are simply precautionary measures to protect Singaporeans from the spread of the virus. They added that those who are unwell or with a fever or respiratory symptoms will be sent to a hospital for assessment and isolated if there is a suspect case. Now, for more on the coronavirus here in Singapore, head on to straitstimes.com. Infectious disease expert Professor Paul Tambaya from National University Hospital was in the studio yesterday, and he answered some burning questions about the coronavirus. If you missed it, here are the highlights. We're now focusing back here in Singapore on the 18 confirmed cases. Sharon is asking, why has no one been discharged yet?
Well, the simple reason, I think, again, I'm not directly involved in the care of any of these cases, but the simple reason is, as I mentioned to you, when people get sick, it's usually day 7, 8, 9. And the first case was only diagnosed on the 23rd of January. So we're barely at day 10 for the first case. So it's important to observe these cases because there's no specific approved antiviral treatment. And so the mainstay of treatment is recognizing complications, diagnosing them early, and treating them early. So I think the teams looking after them want to be careful, want to make sure that they're safe, that they pick up any complications ahead of time. And I think they also want to be sure that they're not shedding the virus. They have to have multiple tests to make sure that these people are not shedding the virus, so that if they're discharged, that it's safe for them to go back, to their homes, to their communities.
And Prof, just to understand better, have you met the 18 cases?
No, I haven't.
You haven't.
Although I'll tell you, we have infectious disease grand rounds, which are held every week. And very soon after the first case was admitted, the doctors from SGH and from the National Centre of Infectious Diseases shared the clinical information about the cases so that we would know what to look out for. And that kind of collaboration between hospitals has been a feature of infectious disease work for many years in Singapore.
Prof, we have another one from our reader, Sivadas Krishnan. Now, Sivadas is asking, what sort of underlying illnesses would lessen the chances of recovery?
Yeah, so again, we have some information from China. There have been a couple of publications in major medical journals. And from what we can tell, the first patient who died was somebody who had liver disease. He had liver tumors. So liver disease, diabetes, these are some of the underlying conditions which have predisposed people to more severe disease.
Right. Prof, now moving on to our next topic that a lot of Singaporeans have chimed in on, which is on the use of the masks. When to use the mask, right? One of the many, of course, who asked about the type of masks is Linda C. Now, she wants to know which mask is the best right now in this situation.
Right. So basically, I think what is important is that the masks need to be used by people who need to use them. So that's people in contact with confirmed cases. So healthcare workers in hospitals need to use the masks that are appropriate for them. And there's been quite a lot of research on this, comparing surgical masks with N95 masks. And the general consensus, which is what the World Health Organization has recommended, is that surgical masks are actually good enough, and the incremental gain from an N95 mask is not worth the effort. Because N95 masks are very uncomfortable. You know, you put them on, you end up rebreathing the air, your CO2 levels start to build up, and so there's a trade-off. See, although they are higher efficacy in terms of filtration, but the downside is that you know, they're going to be very uncomfortable. And by and large, if an infection is spread by droplets, you know, there's the 3 feet thing, surgical mask is good enough. But the thing is, like, for example, influenza, which is spread by droplets, in certain times it can be aerosolized. So, like, for example, if you're doing suctioning or if you're giving high flow oxygen or nebulizers, then at that point in time you might need an N95 mask.
We have a question here, Prof. Our live viewers, Imam and Doreen. Now they're asking, in your experience, how long will this sort of epidemic last? 1 month? 2 months?
Well, you know, I've gone on record saying that I'm pretty sure that once the hot weather comes in, this epidemic will die. And you know what happened with SARS? The numbers were increasing and increasing, and then when the hot weather came to Beijing, all of a sudden the numbers just plummeted. And this happens with a number of respiratory viral infections too. In temperate countries, the flu is a winter disease. Once the hot weather comes in, the flu kind of disappears.
For the full video, you can check it out on our YouTube page, Straits Times. Now, ending things on a light-hearted note. After a jam-packed year of theatre, from shows filled with dazzling musical numbers to simple, heartfelt monologues, the nominations for the Straits Times Live Theatre Awards 2020 are in. A total of 27 productions staged last year have received nods across 12 categories, including Best Production, Best Actress or Actor, and Best Original Script. Leading the pack with 7 nominations is Urinetown the Musical by Singaporean theatre company Pandemonium. Other notable shows with 4 nominations each are Peter Pan in Serangoon Gardens, Malay drama Angkat, and Mandarin play First Fleet. Organised by the Straits Times Live section since 2001, the Live Theatre Awards celebrates the best of Singapore theatre of the previous year. And the winners will be announced at the end of this month. Here to tell us more about these nominations is lifestyle correspondent Benson Ang. Welcome, Benson. Now, Benson, Urinetown has the most nominations, 7, right? Including Production of the Year. Now, it's a satirical comedy which poked fun at topics like populism, corporate corruption, as well as musicals themselves. But what qualities make Urinetown the leading contender at this year's awards?
Well, Urinetown the Musical on the whole was a very strong production, and many aspects of it was very polished. So for example, some of its cast was very impressive. 2 of its performers, namely Benjamin Chow and Sean Ghazi, had acting awards, acting nominations, and not only were they outstanding on their own, they could work very well together. So, you know, it was nominated for Best Ensemble. It also had a very good director who put all the elements together, and some of even its technical aspects were very impressive. For example, its set had a neo-noirish urban feel, and you know, its lighting was very good. Therefore, it was nominated also for Best Set and Best Lighting. So all in all, Urinetown the Musical was a very brilliant piece of theatre.
Right. And Benson, looking at the crop of nominees this year, are there common themes across this myriad of nominated musicals? What does Live want to highlight with this batch of nominees this year?
Well, this year's nominations were quite spread out, and you know, to be honest, they were very multilingual. For example, in the Production of the Year category, there is a Malay drama which has quite a long name. The name is called Angkat, a definitive, alternative, reclaimed narrative of a native. Okay, and so this production is about the relationship between a woman and her adopted child. And not only that, we also have at least 2 productions performed in Mandarin, and one is called First Fleet, and it centers on the transportation of a group of convicts to Australia. And the second is called A Dream Under the Southern Bowl Reverie, and it's about a naval officer venturing into his fantastical dreams. So clearly, the themes are very diverse, and it's very clear that Singapore is seeing many good theatre productions which are not only in English.
Now, Benson, I understand that you are on the judging panel, right? I have to ask, to be nominated, does a production have to be on a very big scale, with many actors, with renowned actors? Does it have to be that way?
No, it does not. Several of the productions which caught our eye last year were actually just performed by one person. For example, A Fiend's Diary was actually a very personal but very gripping monologue performed by Oliver Chong, which is a theatre actor, and he was nominated for Best Actor. And in the same vein, actress Jo Tan performed a one-woman show last year called Fogged, and she was funny. Not only that, she was relatable. Her show was very moving in parts, and she was nominated for Best Actress. So, theatre can be big, theatre can be dazzling, but also theatre can be personal and heartfelt. It all works.
Well, thank you so much, Benson, for coming on to the show to share a bit more about the nominees for the ST Live Theatre Awards this year. Now, the winners of the Live Theatre Awards will be announced at the end of this month. For more on the Live Theatre Awards 2020, head on to the Straits Times website. There we have it, our top stories for today. For more news and videos, do log on to straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Haryanto. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.